Good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to 2015 with the Florida ABE CCRS standards. This is a webinar update today. All of you had attended with one of the trainers this last fall, a workshop. So today what we're going to do is first of all welcome you on behalf of not only myself and Susan Pittman, who's with me, but also the other IPDA trainers that are part of this conference call. So Susan, are you there with us this morning? Or this afternoon, I should say.
Actually, it is this afternoon. I think you missed your timing there, Bonnie. But first thing I'll say to everybody is Happy New Year. It's 2015. I'm not exactly sure where all the time has gone, but gosh, we're right in the middle of the first month of January. So we're looking forward to sharing some resources with you, but this is going to be a little different webinar than what many of you have been used to. And that's because we're going to put a little interactivity into it. Bonnie, don't you think it's time they work a little bit on all this?
I could not agree with you more. Hopefully all of you have downloaded both the PowerPoint and the materials. As Susan told you, today we really are going to talk about some of the action steps that you've taken for the implementation of Florida's Adult Basic Ed Curriculum Framework. So again, it will be your turn in just a moment. But we also know that in the fall trainings and shortly after, we got a lot of requests for, this was great information, but what else do you have? And so we've got some new materials for you based upon the questions that you had for us. And then last but not least, of course, we know that this is an ongoing process, so we're going to talk about those next steps in the process because, again, change really is a process. It is not an event. So, having said that, Susan, let's get started and see how people are doing with implementing these new standards.
Sounds good to me.
What we're going to be doing today is having you interact with us and kind of bring us up to speed on what's happening in your region. So to do that, we're going to do some polls and some questions. If you'll look at the right-hand side of your screen, you're going to see two words. One is polls, one is questions. It should be, about halfway down the box. Your polling screen should look something like this. And when we give you a poll, we're going to ask that you click that little circle that best describes your answer to the polling question. So hopefully everybody can see the poll. Let us know before we get started. Sometimes, though, we can't just get information in such a quantitative manner. So you'll notice that you also have a place called questions. And so throughout the first part of this webinar, you're going to be answering a few questions in the question box. So when a question is launched on the screen, we'd ask that you again keyboard in your answer and send it. Please note that not everyone will see your answers. However, we will be able to pull those answers together to further drive the professional development process. Susan, anything else that we need to ask before we get started with the polling and the question box?
I think that the one thing to let everybody know is that, yes, this is our first shot here at doing polls and asking a lot of questions and having those things going on. So when Bonnie actually is going to launch the polls, and you're going to see it on your screen, you're not seeing it right now, so don't be concerned about that. But in just a minute, she's going to launch one, and at that point in time, what we'll do is make sure we'll double check with everybody to make sure you're seeing it and that you're responding to it. Now, she's not going to give you a long time to do this. You're going to have to think, okay, yes, I did, no, I didn't. We're going to keep it simple here, so we're not going to have lots of long, involved questions for you to work at. But we want as much information as we can get from the field. So, having said that, Bonnie, let's see if we can't move on a little forward, and you will see that we have the first poll question. And so at this point, Bonnie, would you like for me to launch the poll, or would you like to?
I will go ahead and launch the poll.
Okay, so everybody should be seeing in a nice blue screen. Look at that. Look at the numbers who are changing. Okay, we've got, let's see, we have, the numbers are growing. And remember, we've been at it 17, 18 seconds now, so 57% of you have voted. Oh, it's climbing. It's climbing.
I'd say another 5 seconds and we should have almost everyone voted of whether they've accessed that toolkit or not.
Absolutely. And as we go through, let's get down to 40 seconds here, Bonnie, and let's close the poll. And 80% of you have voted. And what we found now is that 54% of you have said, yes, you've accessed the toolkit that's out there. And yay, that is so good to hear, because what we tried to do, and what all of the trainers who are working with you, was to make sure that you had resources that you could take back with you. Now, I know things get crazy, but we do have 46% of you who are saying, no, I haven't accessed that yet. But hopefully what we've done is that maybe you thought, oh, I knew there was something I needed to do. And you'll actually get in there and access that toolkit, because it's there and it's waiting on you, and it's lots of useful information that's there.
Okay.
So now, as Bonnie's going to pull back over to the PowerPoint, we'll have a few more questions that'll come in as we go through. But right now, okay, you said 54% of you said, yes, I've been in there. I've looked at that toolkit. What we would really like to know from you, and this is where you're going to answer in the question box, what would you determine to be the most usable or the beneficial part of the toolkit? And you don't have to give us a dissertation, just a little bit of information would be great. And as Bonnie has said earlier, what we want you to do is to actually come in and in the question box, go through and let us know.
And to answer some of your questions, you should have seen the poll right at the very end.
So let's go back now. So we need you to be answering that question at this point. What did you think was the most usable or beneficial part of the toolkit? And I think I see a couple of things beginning to come in. The quick reference to new standards with the correlations. And then I have, hands-on activities. That's much appreciated. We'd like to know what things you're finding useful so that we can always build to those. And I see from Nancy that she said, hey, I like the guidelines for unpacking standards, because that's something that's so important. Is if we're really going to do this, we have to understand what those standards are and how to work with it. And we have from Jeff, we have everything. It was easy to read standards. And then we have Bonnie, I think people are into the resources and lesson plans. So resources and resources, those are the different kinds of things that we wanted to know from you, because that lets IPDA and it lets the Department of Ed know these are things that were working for us. So what we'll do as we're going through is to make sure that you're actually able to work through these things and have a chance to respond as we're going through. So having said that, Bonnie, I think we will close that question.
Okay.
Because we've certainly got some responses back. And just as a brief review, because I did see one question pop in there a little bit later, you will only see the polls when Bonnie launches one. So don't be trying to find them all the time. And she does show you the results at the end. There's some things you may not see as it's running, but you're going to see what the final responses are. So let's try it again. Bonnie, I think you need to back up. And isn't this another poll for us to do?
This really is, and it deals with how many trainings you've completed using the CCRS ELA materials. So the poll is launched. Go ahead and click which one is most appropriate for you, and we're going to give you 30 seconds.
Oh, I see that we've got 58% up there. Come on, folks. Let's keep on going. Keep on pulling them in. Yes, good. Bonnie, 30 seconds is up.
Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the poll is closed. So,
and what you
everybody
should be seeing now on your screens is you should be seeing the quick poll results. And we see that there are about 50% of you that did 1 or 2 trainings, and whoa, we had a couple of overachievers here with more than 4 at 9%. We do have some areas where you haven't done trainings yet, but you know, the year is young. We're just in the beginnings of 2015 now, but it's good to see that the word is spreading out from where what often happens when we're working with programs and we say, okay, here's a training and please go share the information. And what's really nice, Bonnie, I think for us to hear is that that information is spreading into other areas.
You better believe it. Now, the other thing we know that as we start working with, you know, just all of the implementation processes is that you always need someone who's going to lead the change for your program. And that was one of the things each of you was to decide when you went back to your sites. Who was going to lead the change? So the question's simple. Have you decided? Yes or no? And we're going to give you 20 seconds for this. So click in your answer.
Okay, Bonnie, count it down.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the poll is closed. And it looks like about 2/3 of you have decided who's going to lead the charge, and 1/3 of you haven't decided yet. I'd say decisions are underway soon. What would you think, Susan?
Well, I would think so too, because we have to keep in mind that the CCRSAE, let me get all those letters out there, that part of what we have to do is that these are coming, and they're coming from the Fed. So we need to make sure that we're all standing up and accountable as we move through. So that's one of the things that if you haven't decided yet who's going to lead that change process, time to really get moving with this, because as we're looking forward, we're going to be looking at the possibility, you know, as we move on into, you know, 2015-16, more and more of this is going to be a requirement. And there's a side benefit to all this too. As these new standards are going in, that's increasing outcomes for students, and that means we're going to have better outcomes when students go to take the GED test or as they transition on into. So now, oh, Bonnie, I love this next one because it really does talk about change. And, you know, I have to agree that there are always so many changes in adult ed. So how about we launch one more poll here?
You know, and this is just about, as you're reading through these questions, what's the best words for your staff's attitude about this change of implementing these standards? You know, the fact that it's wonderful you've got those early adopters, or the people who say, yeah, I'm going to do it and I'll be glad to do it, but let's see what somebody else does. Or, you know, We've got so many changes. I'm not really sure we need anything more. So go ahead. I'm going to give you about 15 seconds more to decide where is your staff with their attitude about change regarding these new standards. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the poll is closed. You know, I look at these results. What do you think, Susan?
Well, I think kind of, well, isn't this what we call a mixed bag? You know, it is a challenge for all of us in adult ed because we have faced so many changes over the years. And so, but what we always look at is that as adult ed is changing, what's it doing? It's growing, and ultimately it's all about what's best for students and what we're trying to do there. So as I look at this, I'm really thrilled that we have, you know, 38% who are saying, yeah, it's wonderful, I want to try it in my classroom. I really understand the 46%, I'm willing to do this, but can I see some examples of how it works? Because those are different things, and that really does come down to the way that people respond to the changes that are coming in. So what is it we say? This is not your mother's adult education program anymore. The world has changed, and adult ed keeps on changing with it. So let's see where we go from here.
You know, during our trainings, we talked about the fact that we do have barriers and boosters. We have lots of things that are really positives for what we want to do, but we also know that there are some barriers anytime you start doing something new. So the question for you is, have you in your program identified the barriers and boosters to implementing these new standards from the Florida Adult Basic Ed Curriculum Framework? And 20 seconds.
Okay, Bonnie, count it down.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the poll is closed. And this is kind of interesting, Susan, that 62%, fantastic, but we still have a few of you out there who have not looked at what your boosters and barriers are. But I will take the 62%, and hopefully by the next time that increases even more, because it's difficult to implement something new if you don't know what your positives are and you don't know what's holding you back. So let's go the next step. And I want you to think for a moment, because this is going to be something that we'd like you to put into the question box again. And that is, as you've gone back, what has been the greatest barrier that you've had or your program has had in implementing these new, more rigorous standards? So if you would please type your answer in the question box for us, and we'll give you a minute or so to think about this question and respond for us.
And you know, I see some answers that are coming in here, and you know, although I'm not sitting in an adult education classroom at this point in time, I can certainly relate to them. Planning time. That is such an issue as we're trying to move on for different things as we're going through. And as we're looking at things too, looking at it from a standpoint of getting that buy-in from part-timers, those who are there only a couple of hours a week, and how to get all of that coming into line. I see another one, money for training and no new books aligned with standards. Actually, what we're beginning to see, Jeff, is that we are beginning to see some movement along with the standards. And what I'll point out is that we're going to have a couple of different things that will be coming up that will help with some of this, and how we can look at this as not just about some of the books and those types of things, but also looking at other resources that will make it easier for us as we go through. We come back again and again to the planning time, and I think of all the things in adult education, that is probably one of the most challenging that we have out there, is that lack of planning time. And I get one here, I've got one, students' attitudes and the willingness to push themselves harder. And that's true. A lot of times our big problems that we have is, well, I just want to get the minimum, not looking, and it's a lot about, kind of, we always laugh about the microwave society, where just get this as fast as I can, let me get it done, and I'm out of here, not thinking that I may need something a little different as we're moving on through. And I also see some hesitance from teachers who are struggling with change. That's a part of the problem that we have as well, that it's not always easy to go through and make these changes when we've been used to doing something else. I see one in here, reluctant to move past the GED and TABE test prep. Our adult ed is more than just a testing process and getting people ready for a test. And so I think those are the kinds of things that we have to take a look at. I do see another comment that's coming in, and I understand completely. The TABE is aligned to the old standards, so it's quite challenging to infuse the new standards during daily instruction, meanwhile still addressing existing TABE testing format. My students are not performing as well. I'm hoping that as we go through, and in just a few minutes, you're going to see some of the information on resources that will be out there. If we're truly implementing the standards for CCRS, and looking at those key shifts that we talked about with text complexity, evidence, and also looking at nonfiction, if we really are working toward those, we should be at this point blowing TABE out of the water, because it just doesn't test at that level. It is such a much lower level test. So, yes, but the new materials and those new assessments will be coming. And so we got to figure out how we're ready for those as we're moving through. A need for more effective resources, that's another area that's in there. So what we really appreciate in all this is letting us know what is happening in the field, so that in turn, as we go back and we're looking at what are the needs of the field, we can begin to address some of those. How do you get around this idea of using an old TABE and using new standards? How do you get past some of those kinds of things? So we really, truly appreciate all of your input that's coming in here.
And Susan, just a couple comments that a few of you have made. When we refer to the toolkit, we're talking about the toolkit that is open to all of you who had attended the fall workshops on adult basic education, CCRS. And so that's that special area of materials that will be shared with the entire field very soon following an upcoming webinar. But that is the toolkit that we're speaking of, which is a much, what do I want to say, smaller part of the Florida IPDA website. So, okay, good answers on the barriers. Let's take a look at the other side. What is the greatest booster that you have in implementing these standards? Again, oftentimes we do get bogged down with the negatives, but there are lots of positives happening. So think for a moment, what has been the greatest booster that you've had within your program in implementing these new standards? And if you will, please type those answers into the question box. And the question box is it's basically that second box that you see there.
And I see a couple people who are saying that they can't type in the question box, but I'm actually able to read what you've typed. So, just to let you know, a couple of things that's coming through is that we do see that there's some administration support and willingness to implement changes from a district level and as well as the center level itself. I see from Christina Hicks, she says it's helped the students progress better. And you know, I believe that we can do this, Christina, and I think we do see better progress with students. We say, oh, hey, Laurel Chase, yes, we have a lot of excellent teaching staff that's out there. That's one of our great strengths throughout the state of Florida is that, yes, there are some really good teachers who have embraced the change and they're going at it full speed ahead. I also like this one, Bonnie. How you like this? If-day trainings. Those were really good for CCRS. That helps a lot as we go. Nancy, thank you for your comment regarding knowing we are assisting students in a powerful and positive way. You know, sometimes that is what we have to do as adult educators is, you know, because we certainly can't look at the monetary side of things, but we can look at the fact that we're making a difference. And I've always believed that you as adult educators hold a really special place out there because of what you're able to do. I see another thing from Lindsay Simpson. It creates a more dynamic classroom environment. So let's see, I agree with the if-day trainings. We've got more coming in there. And June, good comment that you have here for us, that everyone is on board with the same message, because that's what we have to do. We may have students out there who are saying, no, I don't want to go that route, you know, I don't think I quite need that. But at the same time, as we're trying to all move forward, that's something that we have to do is have everybody with the same message. So, Bonnie, great job there. Good responses.
Okay, let's do one more poll just to kind of look at where we're at in the field. And so this is the question I need you to just think about, and that's how you would personally assess your development and the implementation of your program's action plan. Remember that we had action plans that you needed to do. It wasn't set up so formally that you couldn't do your own thing, but if you had to assess right now where you're at, you'll notice that the answers are pretty simple. You're either just beginning, on your way, almost there, or you feel like, you know what, I'm pretty well done. So, having said that, let me launch the poll. And please select where you're at. And Susan, I'd like to see that we're closer to 100% voting this time.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. And
I think 76% is where we were at is the highest, so we need to get above 7%.
Oh, we're moving. Little Just a few more of you need to push that button.
Somebody give me a 77%. In the next 5 seconds.
Oh, 78. We're at 78.
5, 4,
80.
3, 2, 1. And the poll is closed. And here are your results. You know, these look really promising. What do you think, Susan?
Well, I think what we're doing here, it looks like our numbers are aligning with some of our previous polls, because we've been running about 2/3 who have, you know, made decisions on who's going to lead the charge, who's been accessing resources, I mean, all those different things. And here we are, if we look at, we're on our way and we're almost there, 64%. And, you know, it's really nice, too, to see that we have some people in the beginning, but at least they're beginning. That's the main thing. The first steps sometimes are the most difficult, the most challenging as we're going through, so that's really good to see.
Okay. As we go forward, the next little part of this is that many of you asked for additional resources in areas. And so what we've done is we've looked at some more tools for you for use in your classroom that basically go along with those 3 shifts. So before we go into the second part of this, I'm going to just say any additional questions, comments that you have. One step up and 2 steps back for our progress. Sometimes you're correct, but you know what? We'll take it because it's going to still get us there.
Okay, so let's take a look. And remember, because you saw this before, those of you who were with us, that we have 3 shifts in ELA. It all comes down to, are the texts that we're using worth reading? Are we asking questions of our students that are worth answering? And are we having them do work that's worth doing? Ultimately, as we look at this, what do students come to adult ed for? They're coming to learn something, knowledge acquisition. And the way that we do that is by really looking and boiling everything down to those 3 elements itself. So let's talk a little bit more in terms of, remember this, that we have this thing called text complexity. Okay, Bonnie, a minute ago on the slide she had text worth reading. What does that mean? Well, it means that we've got 3 different areas here. We've got what a computer can see and measure. That's that quantitative stuff. We have a qualitative bit over here where it's how we can look at it from the human standpoint. Text structure and vocabulary, the things the computer doesn't see and understand. And also, what is it that we're asking that student to do with that reading material? And some of that comes back to what our students' prior knowledge is, their motivation, and their experience. So, having that in mind, that's text complexity. So we want those text worth reading. Now let's take a look as we move through. There's some online readability tools. And if you take a look in your guide, and Bonnie, do you want to cycle over and pull up the guide for us just briefly? For those of you who have not downloaded these materials, at the end of the presentation, we're going to show you where these are so that you can go in. And Bonnie, could you take off those marks on your document, your little paragraph mark up there?
Sure.
I see it highlighted right there. Nope. Go back over to home again. And right
there we are.
There. Thank you. Okay. You have a number of different here, including some online readability calculators. You have access to those. The URLs are provided. There's a little overview that's included there as well. So if we're going to do text worth reading, then we really have to take a look at some of these, because we got to kind of change up some of the tools and resources that we as teachers need to use.
And the reason these came about is most of you who were with us were so thrilled with the co-metrics. You said, what else is out there? So your request from the field was what else was out there, and what we've tried to do is pull together a few things that we hope you find useful.
So next in line, we actually have this thing called text-dependent questions. Remember, we said questions worth asking. If the student doesn't need to read the text to answer a question, why are we using the text? So keep in mind that we want questions that really require students to become more effective readers. We're going to have a new resource coming out for you as we move on into the spring, and we're going to talk about this strategy called close reading and just how essential that is to students gaining knowledge, being able to handle that more complex text, and being able to use evidence. All those things that are going to make a difference for them as they're moving forward. And so keep in mind that we want our students to have to be able to gather evidence and to be able to use it, because what are they going to have to do, Bonnie, with that evidence?
They're going to have to not only answer questions, but they're going to have to write.
Absolutely. And for those of you who have students from all the way to low ABE, all the way up to GED, this works across the board. And nice thing about it, for those of you who have those students who are in the last throes of getting ready for the GED test, this can make a difference for them in earning points for writing. That's something that we want to do. And when we talk text-dependent questions, they can go all the way to the basics of looking for general understanding down to the word, into the sentence, paragraph, because we're not talking about, oh, this is something that just waits until, you get higher level students. This is about everybody and what we can do. So you ask, and I will say this, Bonnie certainly delivered. On pages 3 through 9 in the workbook, you're going to find a bunch of sentence frames so that our students can get started with text-based questions. That's what we want to do.
But even more importantly, we all know that sometimes there's not the materials we need. So what we've done is we've aligned these frames according to the standards. So you have the reading standard for ABE 1. Here's some sentence frames, some beginning frames for text-dependent questions that you can share with your instructors. So if that is indeed the standard they're teaching, if the material that they've pulled is text worth teaching, then here's some sentence starters for them to add as part of their lesson plan. And you can see that not only have we covered the college career readiness standards all the way through, but also you'll notice at the top, they really are at different levels. So when you're looking at those first 3 areas, you're looking at key ideas and details. That's really what those 3 standards are about. When you go to the next ones, you're really looking at text-dependent questions that deal with the craft and the structure, such as what type of genre is used, what is the structure of the nonfiction, is it compare, contrast, etc. And then finally, or in conclusion, the integration of knowledge and ideas. Again,
I thought we were going to get rid of those terms, Bonnie.
I know, but what can I say? We have to do something. So the standards of 7, 8, and 9 really do deal with integration of knowledge and ideas. So a nice little chart for instructors as they're teaching And as they're developing lessons, to just go to this and say, aha, now I know what this means. Now I know what kind of a question I can craft. And I can't take credit for it. These really come from a fellow teacher who is on one of my favorite websites, Teachers Pay Teachers, and of course also from Beth Burke, as well as that wonderful website, Achieve the Core. All the kinds of things that we pull together in one document that we hope that your teachers will find very, very useful.
Okay, so we've talked about text-dependent questions and all of those types of things. So let's talk about one more thing, and that's set knowledge. This one, you know, as we look at it, we think, oh my gosh, I'm so used to having books that I can turn to in the classroom to be able to find little reading passages and those types of things. And what am I going to do? Because let's face it, we don't have a lot of what we call content-rich nonfiction, especially when it comes to teaching reading. Often we have more narratives and literary works that are included in those books. But we really need to shift over to that nonfiction area because that's what you read all the time, and that's what I read all the time, with a few little fiction books thrown in there every now and then just for good measure. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you back to the guide again, because you're going to say, I don't know where to find all this stuff. Well, we have a bunch of URLs for you, websites for fiction and nonfiction articles, and that's pages 10 through 12. I know, and you said it loud and clear in answering one of the questions that was dealing with the barriers. We don't have a lot of materials that work toward these standards yet. So it requires that we begin to get a little inventive with what we're doing as we're waiting on publishers and all to come forward with some other materials. So what you'll see are a lot of different resources that are here. What we would ask you to do is to go out and just explore a few. When we start talking content-rich nonfiction and we talk about complex text, we're not talking about things that are hard or difficult. We're really talking about how complexity, and that's cognitive skills, and our students need those so much. So you have a lot of different resources that are available there. I give all credit to the guru of web searching, which is Bonnie, who can find so many resources in different places that work so well for all of us as we're going through. So we've talked about that, and Bonnie, I'm just going to have you stay here if you don't mind on the workbook, because this next one is so important. We had some comments from people earlier in some of our questions about unpacking standards. And if you would, Bonnie, could you talk just a little bit about pages 13 through 15? And I think you might be able to actually enlarge your page a little bit, like on your view, so that maybe somebody who doesn't have the workbook sitting in there could see it a little bit better.
Let's see
I know my eyes are not quite as good as they used to be.
Let's see if we can go to about 125.
Okay, perfect. Anyway, what Bonnie is going to do is she's going to talk to you a little bit about unpacking standards, because it really does come down to the fact that we've got to be able to do this if we're going to understand and put them into the classroom. So, Bonnie, take it away.
Okay, what we've provided for you is, as your teachers are developing lesson plans, they need to know to what do they develop these to. You know, I see all these standards. How do I use the standards to develop my curriculum or my lessons? And there's lots of ways to do that. But let's start simple, because I know myself, our adult ed teachers don't have all the planning time in the world. So the easiest route to go to interpret the standards so that we can create effective lessons is just using a very simple chart. And I'll talk talk through very briefly what the chart requires and then show you an example. But what I'd recommend is that your teachers take the level standards and benchmarks, those are the ones that are right under the anchor standards, and list the standard one at a time, and that's your column 1. Column 2 talks about what skills are expected. It's a fancy word for saying what are the verbs in the standard. What kinds of skills do those verbs tell me I need to teach? The concepts are the nouns. And here again in the standard, what are the nouns in that standard? This comes down to what students need to know. The particular context is, how am I going to teach this? Am I going to teach it by doing an opinion piece or a business letter? What kind of context will I use? And at what cognitive level of thinking? Now, right now we are using web, but no problem with Bloom either, because those two really should work together in the classroom to determine cognitive complexity. And then, not a full-blown lesson plan, but what are some ideas, some sample activities that would encompass both the skills and the concepts at the appropriate level? Now, if you're like me, I need to see it. So, this is the way it would look if a teacher were completing this kind of a template. You'll notice that I've put the anchor standard there, and this happens to be the College Career Readiness Standard for Reading, Adult Basic Ed, and it is the second anchor standard, which is to determine central ideas or themes of a text and analyze their development, summarize the key supporting details and ideas. In the first column, I've decided that I am going to take ABE 2. That is that second NRS level. And so that standard plus the first benchmark I've written here. When I say skills included in the standard, remember I said that's the verbs. So I identify that the first verb is determine. The second one as I go down is analyze. Well, then the standard tells me that a student has to know how to summarize. In the first benchmark, which is that A, it says determine. Again, it comes down to provide an accurate summary. So that tells me that the verb form would be to summarize again. And I need to have text distinctions, so I'm going to make distinctions. Those are the skills that I need to teach my students. Now, what are the concepts? Those are the nouns. I need to determine. Determine what? The theme or the central idea of a text. I need to teach my students to analyze. Analyze what? Development. I need them to summarize. What? Summarize the details, and ongoing. How am I going to teach it? What context? Well, I've decided it's going to be some type of argumentative writing piece. And you'll notice here that I've used the depth of knowledge levels, and I indicate beside those verbs what levels of writing they're going to do. Then finally, I determine some sample activities, such as maybe I'm going to have students use a text and describe pros and cons, because they're going to create a graphic organizer. Again, the sky is the limit. Once our teachers have gotten to those sample activities, then developing lesson plans is easy. Why? Because the skills and the concepts become the measurable objectives of the lesson. And the sample activities become that step-by-step of what I need to find strategies and activities to teach. Again, a great way to determine that, first of all of the standards are properly implemented in our classroom and provides teachers with a fairly easy route to go to unpack or interpret the standards. Again, we've given you blank templates to use, and on another note, because it's really necessary to see how this works, your IPDA team of trainers is going to develop additional lesson plans to incorporate into the IPDA website so that you can see how this works, how this gets taken from interpreting or unpacking into the actual development of a lesson plan. Again, you requested it, and so what we tried to do was find a format that could be easily adapted to our adult ed classrooms and easily used by our instructor.
And one other thing, if I could, is that, and I know some of you may be sitting there going, oh my gosh, my students would have a hard time at that level being able to do certain things, or I have even lower level students. Don't be blinded by that they're going to write an argument, because maybe that's a group activity that they're going to do, and they're going to listen to the text, and they're going to answer questions and then be able to do a graphic organizer. The really nice thing about all of this is that when you look at those standards, you can move up the ladder and you can move down the ladders, but still have the same standard working across the board. That's what's really nice for us, is that we're not having to look at totally different things for different levels of students. We're all building and we're all on the same page. So, you know, if this needs to move up for some students that you're working with, there are ways to do that, and your expectation, your product that the student is going to complete is really what changes as you move on through the line. But we want to early on.
And remember, it's based on the standard. Yeah.
That's right.
It is based on the standard.
Yeah, we want to early on make sure students are understanding words like, you know, and that we're helping them do this, that they're learning how to analyze, and they're learning how to, what does determine mean. So there's so many opportunities here for us as we're working with our students.
So we've had a number of questions, and before you leave us today, and you know, we have almost finished with today's content, just remember, as we said before, it really is a process. It's not an event, and it really is going to require, this came back in 2000, but it is every bit as accurate today. The key to successful curriculum reform is to develop a new culture of teaching and learning, and that really is what we're doing here. As you know, each of you, as you're creating that climate for change in your program, that it's really important as we continue to go together, that we build that urgency that it is unnecessary for our students to be successful in today's world. It's not just about going to post-secondary ed. It's about the fact that we want all of our students to have a wonderful opportunity at having a successful life with a career that they love. And that starts with us, whether it is at an ABE 1 level or a GED prep level. The fact that we do have to get that buy-in, that we engage our whole organization, realizing that we need to go with small steps, and again, allowing those who are really excited about change to go ahead and then show the others how it works. And again, don't let up. It is not going away. It needs to stick because, again, it's good for adult education. So today what we've tried to do is, first of all, for us, get an idea of where we are at in our state, but then to take you through some more materials that you had requested. So the question is, where do I find them?
And the answer is on the IFDA website. Yay!
Because we're dealing with adult basic ed standards at this point, we are on floridaifda.org. And where you get the materials from today's website is after you go in, click into ABE, click into the webinars, and you'll notice there you are, Tools for the Classroom. That is today's webinar. Now the recording is not there yet, of course, but it will be. But right now what you do have there are the presentation slides and the handout. All you need to do is right-click and save, or open up and save, and you'll have both of those documents from today. For those of you who were wondering where the toolkit is, again, you need to sign in to your portal, and you should see there the resources that are part of the CCRS toolkit. Are we okay with that?
I think at this point, let's talk just a little bit about where we're going, and you know, I know we've got just a few more minutes as we're moving on through, but I love the quote. This one, Lily Tomlin, "The road to success is always under construction." You know,
I thought it was appropriate since she got the Kennedy.
I think that's absolutely excellent, because I think the roads through Jacksonville are always under construction, just like they are going through Atlanta. But so we have work to do. We have things that we want to do. We're work in progress, but keep in mind a couple of things that we really need that need to be done out in the field, and that's your team. Continue to participate in professional development activities, webinars and trainings and all those things. And make sure that you're an integral part of a statewide professional learning community, because that's what we're all trying to learn as we're moving forward. For those 30-some-odd% of you who are just kicking it into gear, you need to really look on developing that local action plan and see where you are. And maybe you want to call a neighbor in a surrounding county and say, hey, where are you at, and you know, what were some of the good things, what were some of the not so good things. Really go back and let's take a look at those key shifts, because if we do look at the key shifts in ELA standards and those practices, what we are going to find is we're going to find students do have greater outcomes. It's a little upfront work for us as we're making the change, but it can make a huge difference for students. Look at innovations that are out there, materials, strategies. We've tried to share some things with you today that hopefully will be useful to you as you're trying to juggle through all these different things. And, you know, we want you to share that vision and share your ideas and your strategies and your successes. Let us know how things are going and where things are maybe not going as well as you'd like them to at this point, and how can you kind of break through those barriers. You know, it's kind of like when you're on a diet or whatever and you hit a plateau. Okay, so I got here, now how do I get that boost to move on to something else? So again, use the IPDATE website. My gosh, what a load of resources that are out there and available. And Bonnie, what's coming
soon? Coming soon. There will be a Florida IPDATE Online Learning Center, and as we speak, an online learning course will be there that deals with the ELA standards. I think you will like what it does, because it will not only interpret the standards, but it will also integrate classroom activities and strategies and be in a very usable form. Susan and I always hate long courses, so these are going to be chunked into short things that teachers can just go in, or administrators, and see. Also, be on the lookout, because there are going to be a lot more lesson plans and grab and goes and webinars from the field, for the field, because there again, none of us have the time to attend a lot of workshops as much as we'd like to. So we're going to, in this spring session, really push the virtual learning community. And being part of the virtual learning community is wonderful. I can tell you already, I've had a request from the field, what does this look like in the classroom? If I'm an administrator, what should I be looking for when I look through and walk through my classrooms? And I'm thinking, what a great resource for a next webinar. So as you have request ideas, please, please share them with us, because that's what develops this online, this virtual learning community. So, last but not least, in our last couple minutes before we close out with you today, questions, comments.
And remember, your question box is still open, so you can add information to it if you would like. So, and yay, Karen, she just found the question box. All right. That's great. Hey, it works. What we do hope to do is really take a look at all the feedback that we've gotten from everybody today, and make sure that we put information out there to everybody, what's going on, and that you're on an ongoing basis getting the information that you need in order to do what you need to do for your students. And we do have a thing here, where do we get the login for Common Core Achieve? And actually, Common Core Achieve, is achieve.org. It's a different website. And so you may want to go out, and if you'll just do achieve.org, you'll find some information there for Common Core.
There is no login.
Right.
Other questions? If not, stay in touch, because there is always something new on Florida IP Day. So on behalf of the entire IP Day team, again, we hope that 2015 is starting out absolutely fantastic for each and every one of you. Stay in touch, because we will. So thank you for being with us today. Susan?
Goodbye, everybody. Have a great evening and have a great rest of the week.